In the final scene of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Episode 1, we see elves traveling to the Valinor, the kingdom of the dead, in the west. In Second Age Middle-earth, the journey is regarded as a blessing and an honor. Galadriel, as she appears in this show, Morfydd Clark, is sent on the quest as a consolation prize for her unsuccessful search for Sauron. Fans of Tolkien may be wondering why the first episode ended the way it did as they frantically click play on The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Episode 2 on Prime Video. Is visiting Valinor really as wonderful as it seems? Do travelers have the opportunity to spend all of eternity there, unchanged and completely content? Or is the journey to the west some sort of death rite that kills everybody who dares to go there? The Second Age is the mythological time period before Frodo was given the One Ring, and it is the setting of Amazon's The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power. The elves think Morgoth, a First Age villain, has been defeated, but Galadriel isn't so sure. She has been driven by a desire to find and kill Sauron after her beloved brother Finrod Felagund, Will Fletcher, was killed by Morgoth's lieutenant. The brave Galadriel is at odds with her fellow elves, who wish to take advantage of this time of peace because of her quest for vengeance. Before I start, please subscribe to my channel Teleflix and don't forget to hit the bell icon. Major spoilers ahead if you have not watched the first 2 episodes yet. In the opening scene, a young Galadriel creates a paper boat that can travel down a river, much like a real ship might, but the young boy playing by the river destroys it. Her older brother comforts her and teaches her a valuable lesson as he draws her to one side. He conveys the significance of continuously following the light via poetry. However, that tranquility is short-lived. The elves resist as Morgoth submerges Valinor in darkness. After centuries of conflict, Morgoth is eliminated, but his army of orcs has grown and is now commanded by Sauron, Morgoth's replacement. Galadriel's brother is murdered by Sauron, who is then determined to track him down, leaving Galadriel a lady filled with a desire for vengeance. From the beginning, this young Galadriel is very different from the one Cate Blanchett portrayed in Peter Jackson's films. Of course, she is younger, but youth also brings a quick wit and a spirit of rebellion that propel her to literally travel to the ends of the earth with her group in search of the orcs and their new commander. The first episode also introduces High King Galad, Benjamin Walker, half-elf and future elven lord of Rivendell Elrond, Robert Armaya, and Ringmaker Celebrimbor, Charles Edwards. These characters are all well known from the trilogy or legendarium. In accordance with J.R.R. Tolkien, Elrond and Galadriel are close friends who reunite when she arrives in Lindon. However, they are torn apart when Elrond persuades Galadriel to accept the king's offer to give up her quest and travel to the west, thereby, in the king's words, putting an end to the days of war. Even while this Elrond is still very different from Hugo Weaving's Elrond, who was merely a writer and lacked long hair, we can already see glimpses of his promise as Celebrimbor hires him for an unknown project. The series then switches to 2 all-new tales, the Harfoots and Southlands, after introducing us to the lore we are already familiar with. Arondir, Ismael Cruz Cordova, a human healer for whom he has feelings despite their 2 species not always seeing eye to eye, must say goodbye to Bronwyn, Nazan Banyati, a human who was watching over them in the Southlands, a land of men, and protecting them from Morgoth and the orcs, are finally allowed to return home. Their estrangement does not last long, though. They visit a nearby village after finding an unsettlingly sick cow and find it completely devastated, a sign that the evil is still present. Additionally, there are warning flags in Bronwyn's hometown when her son Theo, Tyro Muhafadin, displays a kilt that bears the mark of Sauron. The only place where there is peace is in the land of the Harfoots, where these migrant forebears of the hobbits are peacefully going about their daily lives. Only 2 girls, Poppy, Megan Richards, and Nori, Markella Kavanagh, who are out picking berries and nearly run into a wolf, disturb this peace. A shooting star smashes outside the Harfoots camp, revealing the stranger, yet nothing can remain positive in a world where Sauron will soon return, Daniel Wayman. Galadriel jumps from the ship just before it reaches Valinor in the final scene of the episode, leaving her stranded in the middle of the ocean, trying to figure out what to do and begins to swim toward Middle-earth. I suppose Michael Phelps should eat his heart out. We encounter a number of individuals who rank significantly lower on the scale of absolute authority elsewhere in the realm. Among them is Arondir, Ismael Cruz Cordova, a common elf soldier stationed at a far-flung outpost in charge of a group of people whose ancestors supported Morgoth during the Great War. He has developed feelings for one of them despite their questionable origins, a pretty single mother named Bronwyn, Nazan Banyati, who in a nod to traditional Middle Ages filmmaking is intended to stand out by the fact that she is not covered in grime. Her young son Theo, Tyro Muhaffadin, discovers an artifact bearing the same Sauron sigil that the future Dark Lord carved into Finrod's flesh and left in his abandoned fortress, while she and Arondr investigate a mysterious blight and illness that has taken root in a village to the east of her own. It quickly catches fire and seems to exert a hypnotic hold on the boy. Speaking of being covered in grime, the Harfoots, a race of hobbit ancestors that make up the episode's final third, appear to be invariably in that condition. The Harfoots are a nomadic group who survive off the soil, led by a learned man named Sadok Burrows, Lenny Henry. The outgoing young woman Eleanor Nori Brandyfoot, Markella Kavanagh, and her shy best friend Poppy Proudfellow make up our main Harfoot family. Following a meteor to its landing site, after receiving a few unsettling signs, the daring Nori finds a full-sized human figure curled up among the debris. The likelihood is high that this is the character Oren, played by Joseph Maywell, a seasoned Game of Thrones actor, but who knows? Second episode follows a variety of disjointed individuals as they each contribute to the Rings of Power's far-flung exploits as we once again travel around the Horn. Galadriel, who is literally floating from heaven to earth, is foremost as usual. She finds a group of human survivors who have been shipwrecked and carefully hides her elven ears from them. She is quickly discovered, though, and everything is suddenly out of the question when a worm, basically a draconic sea serpent, arrives to complete the destruction of their ship that it began. She and a brazen human named Halberd, Charlie Vickers, are the only survivors of the terrifying encounter. They end up being found by an unidentified sailor of unknown origin. Elrond, a friend of Galadriel, is presented to Celebrimbor, Charles Edwards, a skilled craftsman from the Eregion Elven realm, by his king Galad. Celebrimbor, who has the Hammer of Feigner, the elf who created the magical jewels known as the Silmarils that initially sparked the Great War with the original Dark Lord Morgoth, is essentially the Michelangelo of elves. He carries the weight of history with him. He has to build a specially designed tower and forge in order to carry out his ambitious intentions to create something more impactful and long-lasting than merely works of art and artifacts. Galad is unwilling to provide the manpower that will be necessary for that. Elrond is inspired by this to get in touch with Prince Durin, Owain Arthur, the Lord of the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, or the Mines of Moria for you Lord of the Rings veterans. Prince Durin is a character from the Lord of the Rings. At this point of time, the mines are stunning, bright, and covered in thick vegetation and living dwarves instead of skeletons and orcs. The only issue is that Elrond hasn't called in 20 years, during which Durin got married and had 2 children, and the prince is enraged about it. For an elf, this period of time is a mere flicker of an eye, but for a dwarf, well, damn it, it matters. And before Elrond is willing to consider the proposition, Prince Durin makes him endure a lengthy test of strength. However, he does entertain it, mostly at the request of his wife, Princess Dissa, Sophia Namvit. At this point, I'd like to draw attention to my 11-year-old daughter's fury over the lack of beards on dwarf women and children, which she believes to be an evolutionary adaptation meant to aid the dwarfs in filtering harmful particles while mining. It's challenging for me to disagree. But the prince meets with his father, King Durin, after Elrond departs, Peter Mullen, veteran of everything from Westworld to Ozark to the Underground Railroad. The monarch is very dubious that an elf lord would appear at their kingdom's doorstep so soon after they've discovered some mystery thing in a treasure chest that the show does not yet deign to reveal to us. Arondr, an elf scout, and Bronwyn, his human love interest, find a human settlement that has been entirely destroyed, but there are no bodies to be found. Instead, it appears that every resident has been taken down into a tunnel constructed by unidentified hands. While Bronwyn hurries back to her town and kills an orc that has emerged out of a similar tunnel to attack her son Theo, Arondr explores the tunnel and is grabbed up by himself by unknown hands. With this proof that orcs are at work, echoed by Halberd's assertion to Galadriel that these agents of evil destroyed his house, despite Gil belief Galad's that they had all long since vanished, Bronwyn persuades her people to leave. Nori Brandyfoot, the protagonist of Harfoot, strives to establish contact with the enigmatic guy who disappeared from the sky in the first episode. He summons a constellation of stars for which he must search using the fireflies that the Harfoot's lanterns are powered by, and the intrepid Nori is determined to assist him in finding it. In my opinion, this mysterious figure is one of the 2 so-called blue wizards who came to Middle-earth during the Second Age to protect the East from Sauron's rule. This is according to contemporary Tolkien study. Additionally, the wagon that Nori and her companion Poppy are using to transport the mystery man rolls downhill while they are not paying attention, which is a very amusing physical comedy gag. For a show like this, humor is important. If you contrast this episode with, say, any other good television episode, it becomes clear what the major issue with it is. The majority of the time on prestige television, character interaction drives the plot. People run into one another, engage in dialogues, disagreements, or fights, come out the other side either transformed or even more determined to remain the same, and the plot develops from there. To utilize House of the Dragon as a clear point of comparison for this show, this is how it functions.